Thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited about this panel, Building Solidarity, Protecting Education Through Collective Action. As we get things started here, we'll just note we have people that are joining us from different parts of Alberta, but those of us who are here in Calgary, we're in Treaty 7 territory, which is the home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika nations. And just next door, we have the Tsuut'ina Nation, which I only recently learned shares language and culture with the Dene people. And then further west, we have the Stoney Nakoda, and of course, we are also home to Métis peoples. And I know that I've enjoyed learning from different Indigenous communities, knowledge keepers, and elders, and feel that they have much that can teach settler society about living in reciprocal relationship with the land. So with that, let's get started. And we have a group of people here that are going to talk to us about the importance of collective action, building solidarity, and about working in unions to advance better working conditions and justice. And so let's dive right in with our first speaker, and that's Jason, and I hope Jason's ready to roll with that. And I'll give you a brief introduction if you don't mind. So Jason Schilling is the current president of the Alberta Teachers Association, and is also serving a third term as president, having been first elected in 2019. He's a graduate of the University of Lethbridge and has taught English and drama at Kate Andrews High School in Coaldale for 17 years. And I will let Jason say anything else he would like to add to that and get started.
Well, thank you for that. Hopefully, again, you can hear me, or we're all good for sound there. Yeah. As soon as you started talking about who I am, I was like, oh, I forgot to send the bio. So good job at scrambling together that there. I appreciate that. Yes, I have been teaching since 1996, and have actually been involved with the Alberta Teachers Association my entire career. I started early on, I guess, when I was an undergraduate. I was vice president of the Education Undergraduate Society, and so I've recognized the value of the Alberta Teachers Association, the benefits that it has to me as a member, and then knowing that every union benefits from its membership giving back. And so have been involved within working with the association in some form of capacity throughout my entire career. Very early on was tapped on the shoulder by my mentor teacher when I was a student teacher at the U of L and the program there, who was the negotiating chair of the subcommittee for my local. And she just tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I think you would be good at this work. And then, you know, here you are 20 some years later, the president of an organization that is 51,000 members. And so the path, I think, how every one of us gets in terms of being involved within our organizations and our unions is really interesting on how those stories sort of unfold. But I think they all start with the genesis of somebody tapping you on the shoulder to get involved with that kind of work. So I know that we were sent sort of some questions around to frame a little bit of our conversation. And I've framed my presentation around that a little bit as well. So just wanted to highlight for people who might not be familiar of the ATA within the Alberta context, but the Alberta Teachers Association represents teachers in the public, the separate or the Catholic, and the Francophone school district. So you have to be working in a public school in order to be a member of the Alberta Teachers Association. And membership within our union is automatic. So we don't have to go out and recruit people to be members of the ATA. If you teach in a public school, you are automatically a member of the Alberta Teachers Association. We do, however, represent some members who belong to charter schools and one private school, and we bargain for them. So we hold the bargaining certificate for them. So they're not full active members of the association. They have a different level of membership, which we call associate members. And other people can be associate members, like faculty members of universities, or maybe retired teachers or people like that. What sort of service is provided to members, depending on the membership, depends on the level of membership that they have. Part of our job, it says within our website, is that, it enables us as an association, because of membership, to enable us to work collectively on promoting well-being of education. It's part of our mandate. We have objectives that are sort of laid out through legislation. We are bound by legislation. Our objectives are laid out that way. We're a professional union, so we have the union function of collective bargaining, ensuring that members' rights are being upheld through enacting out the collective agreement. But we also have a professional function, so we do work around curriculum, instruction, assessment, professional development. AI is a big driver right now in terms of the professional development opportunities that we're providing through teachers. And we also look at our own budget, and then we do a lot of work on advocacy with government. That's a huge part of the governance role of the association, and we're just coming off 2 days of Provincial Executive Council, and that's a huge role of mine in terms of being the spokesperson of the association and to represent the ATA within meetings and other meetings with I like to call them the alphabet gang. So that's the, ASBA, CAS, the Alberta School, Catholic Trustees Association. Well, I meet quite regularly with other unions such as AUPE, UNA, QP. I've seen Curtis at many things. So yeah, I call them the alphabet gang, because we all ride horses at noon, that sort of thing. So there we go. We always say to our members too that during sort of one of the things I'm going to go to tonight actually is an induction ceremony when we welcome new members into the association. And one of the key things that we talk to them about is that they do a pledge. And the pledge says that you will make a commitment to the knowledge that your professional organization that you're joining can only achieve its objectives to the extent to which you participate in its affairs and government. And I don't know about the other folks who are working within the capacities of their unions, but member engagement is always a grind. It's always one of those things that we are working on constantly. And that's the same with member organizations across Canada. We belong to the Canadian Teachers Federation, and those leaders there will tell you that getting members engaged to be involved in their union is really difficult sometimes, especially I think post-pandemic, when there's a lot of stress out there, there's a lot of burnout and anxiety, and as we watch various sort of news things that happen, it tends to sometimes turn people away of being involved. But it's really the work of the association and other unions to make sure that their members are engaged, and we do a variety of things in communications to engage our members in a variety of different topics. Because when I segue into the next question, and I'm timing myself as well, Brian, to make sure I don't go over 10 minutes. So I know I got a little time frame here. That, being involved during collective action times is really important. That's when we need members to be able to attend meetings and to step up, because collective action at times is necessary as a lever in order to move what you would like to see within the bargaining process. And we're right in the middle of bargaining, as most public sector unions are in Alberta, and that is, giving information to members so that they know where we are in the process, educating members about the bargaining process, because it can be challenging for members to keep it straight, because we have a bi-level bargaining model here in Alberta when it comes to teachers. We have central table bargaining, which gets settled first, and then local bargaining happens afterwards. And there's all these processes within there that sometimes can be confusing to our members who are just trying to, on the day-to-day basis, teach kids. And keeping all of this straight sometimes can be difficult with them. So part of our job around that is to make sure that they understand the bargaining process. And when we need them to be at meetings, we try to get them to those meetings. And like other unions, we've been trying to be as creative as we can with having some meetings online. But quite honestly, sometimes when you are having a critical conversation, for instance, if you're looking at job action or a strike vote, you sometimes need to be face-to-face in order to have those conversations, because relationship building is really, really key within that. And you also want your members to trust their union and to trust their leadership within their union. And so it's really important while we're looking at, building bridges with other unions and stuff as well, that you're out there talking with that and talking to the members and getting them to understand that collective action during critical moments is important. One of the conversations that we have, and I'm sure others do within their unions as well, is there's always a bit of a gut check. You need to know where your members are in terms of wanting to do collective action and just what does it mean. Having been on strike myself in 2002, out for 13 days, teaching in Vulcan, which is a pretty small town in southern Alberta. When you're on strike, you're pretty much in I see you there, Brian. They're pretty much in a bubble, right? And people are watching you, and so it's difficult. So you have to make sure that people are willing to do that. So one of the other things that I do, and I see, like I said, I see Curtis at all sorts of things as well, is to build bridges with other unions. So it's important that we've been working on this the last several years to make sure that we meet regular with other public sector unions within the province to understand sort of where they are in terms of the bargaining process, what are the things that they are asking for in terms of trying to push things together. It's also having political conversations, because in association we're nonpartisan, but other unions have partisan sort of flavors to them, and understand that that's an important element in a decision by their membership, but our membership has decided it a different way. And so trying to get that sense of working together so that we have a lot of unity moving forward. And I think through the last couple of years, we've seen more and more conversations happen with other unions. There used to be a group prior to the pandemic, we called it Wednesday Group, where it wasn't just unions that came together, but also service, public service groups that would come there as well. Public Interest Alberta, Parkland Institute, those kind of groups as well. So it's really important that we spend time here working together collectively on the things that benefit our society, and membership is really key to all of that, and building those relationships. So with that, I will stop talking, because I don't want Brian to put up some like red thing that says stop talking now, and there we go. So thanks for your time, and look forward to hearing from the others as well.
Thanks so much, Jason. And let me just remind everyone, we're going to try to hear from everyone first. And then if you would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand. We'll call on you and invite you to unmute, or if you'd rather type into the chat, that's fine. So I'll also mention that Curtis also has another engagement at 5, and so may be required to jump off as soon as things are getting closer to that end of the hour. So next up, we have Curtis Jackson, who is the Vice President of the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees. Curtis Jackson is a seasoned activist and organizer who was elected AUPE's vice president in the 2023 convention. He was born in Calgary, raised in Alberta, is an alumni of Medicine Hat College and the University of Calgary, lives in Medicine Hat with his partner of 23 years, and is a humble father of 6 kids, 3 of whom are spread across southern Alberta in universities, including one right here at Mount Royal. So Kurt's served as a member of AUP's provincial executive since 2021, and has, he also chairs the Anti-Privatization Committee, which I'd like to hear a bit more about, as well as the AUPE Young Activist Committee, and is vice president assigned to the AUPE Local 071 Post-Secondary Education and School Boards, and I believe is at University of Lethbridge as part of that work tonight. So without further ado, let's turn to Curtis. And I'll just, I don't know what other people's screens look like. If you have the gallery view and you would rather have a spotlight, you can go to the 3 dots, you can go to change layout, and you can choose sidebar, which will give you a spotlight and a sidebar at the same time if you need to do that. So Curtis, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Brian. I think I'm the opposite of Jason today. I actually gave too much of a bio because as you kept going on, I was like, geez, that's too much. So sorry for that. Thanks for sitting through it. As advertised, my name is Curtis Jackson. I am the Vice President with AUPE. Just a bit of overview. Sorry, AUP is the largest trade union in Western Canada. We have over 105,000 members this year. And we represent public sector as well as some private sector. So we have Government of Alberta is exclusively our bargaining unit with the addition of a lot of healthcare locals. So we have the AHS, which is getting split up into 4 different or 5 different silos now. We have licensed practical nurses, we have healthcare aides, we have the general support services workers in healthcare. And of course, we have many post-secondary institutions. So today I just thought I would chat about collectivism really quick and just identify that first and foremost, it's one of the very few methods that we as a working class have that actually sees positive change and growth for us. And maybe I'll just take a second to divert and just identify what working class means. So trying to be political but nonpartisan, working class mean, did you make $10 million in the month of January already? And I would guess the answer is no for everybody here. That is quite frankly what separates the working class from the, well, we used to call it the ruling class, but the rich or the bosses or however you want to talk about it. If you refer to union work as you know, connecting with members on the shop floor, then you might use the word bosses, as our president does sometimes. If you're like me, you'll say words like the rich. But ultimately, what we are is we are a working class. And so what do we have as a tool at our disposal? The answer is collectivism. And it's the very basic nature of a trade union. The concept of collectivism is it can be so simple and it can be extremely complex, but it starts with the basic understanding that as a group, we have way more power together than we do apart. But this also means that we need to set aside our very basic instinct to focus on our own self-interest and self-preservation. This means we need to think about the group. We need to think about the best interests of every individual in the group. In my opinion, this is what the age of awakening and enlightenment is. It's knowledge that as a collective, as a group, we can go further and higher than we ever did before. That's the basic nature of collectivism. Just to kind of highlight the strength of collectivism, I actually want to do a little bit of an experiment. Now, I wasn't sure how many people would be here, but I think we have enough. So if you will humor me, can I just get one single volunteer to unmute their mic and say hello?
Hello.
Hello. Oh,
Hello.
MFRA president. Okay, you know what? I'm going to give it to Michelle. Michelle, I'm going to ask you to take part in this experiment. So I'm going to ask something of you, and I want you to verbally respond however you feel the correct response is, okay? Are you ready? Okay. Michelle, I want you to come over and fix my roof for me.
Oh, sure. I've never fixed a roof before. I'd love to try something new.
Great. Michelle, I want you to come over and fix my roof right now.
Sure. I'm walking.
Michelle, no, I need you over right now. Come and fix my roof. I don't think you understand. This second, can you fix my roof?
Why are you being so unreasonable?
Michelle, you will come over and fix my roof right now. Okay, we're going to time out. Now, this is where it gets fun. Can everybody please unmute your mic? And we're going to repeat the process, but I want you to respond all together at the same time. Are you ready? Everybody unmute. Okay, everyone, I want you to come over right now and fix my roof.
No.
I don't think you understand. Come over and fix my roof.
No.
It's not gonna happen.
Don't do it.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, it shouldn't be like that points out the power of collectivism, because you made me question my resolve. I started laughing because I felt all of the power that I initially had for Michelle completely sucked out of me when I had multiple people saying no. And furthermore, saying no in such a great tone that showed me my request was ridiculous. It's just a general idea of how strong a collective response is. Your collective strength was so much of a force that it deflated my own sense of power and control. And that's the strength that we as unionized workers have. In a world full of distractions and polarizations, it's so important to remember that we have this power. It's always there for us. It's always waiting. The other thing I want to talk about is the climate right now. Now, I don't want to get too political. I already tried to do that before the meeting started, but in 2019, the newly elected Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, infamously entered the legislature with earplugs. Does everyone remember that lovely time in Alberta history? The official response to unions by the government in Alberta became on that day to not respond. The symbolic gesture of wearing earplugs in the legislature was a precursor to the relationship that we have now with our government. I believe the response is based on strategy that we will quiet down, we'll go away, we'll submit to whatever mandate the government gives through their Provincial Bargaining and Compensation Office, or PubCo, that we've all come to know and love. And there's literally only one answer to this strategy. And does anyone have an idea as to what that strategy I would submit is? Actually, to be louder. In October of 2024, 8,000 workers, and I'll throw that to actually Quinn Bender, who's the president of NASA at the University of Alberta Faculty Association. Quinn presented at the Parkland Conference that it was over 8,000 people descended upon the legislature in October of 2024 in a show of solidarity. I was there. I had no idea there was 8,000 people there. But one of the questions I remember yelling to the crowd over a megaphone was, do you think they can hear us? And the answer was no. And my next question was, so what do we got to do? And according to Quinn, 8,000 people screamed, yell louder. And so I would encourage all of you to think about that for a moment, to think about your strength, to look next to you in your work sites, to your colleagues, to your coworkers, and realize that we all have strength. And when we come together, that strength is so magnified. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Curtis. I'm thinking about pots and pans and cowbells. Okay, I hope everybody feels that collective voice rising up to say no, not this time. Thanks again for that, and hold your questions for the end. We're going to move now to our very own Dr. Christopher Grignard, who is an assistant professor in our Department of English, Languages and Cultures. His primary teaching and research areas are in Indigenous literatures, theater, and film. And his other areas are in dramatic literature and performance, as well as academic writing composition. Christopher, you may take the stage.
All right. Thank you. And thank you to members of the MRFA for inviting me to be part of this panel. I just want to note, I'm just going to share a screen, and I liked, Brian, your encouragement for people to change their format, because I'm just going to call up a short PowerPoint, and please, Brian, let me know if I run out of time, but I'm pretty sure I'll stay within the 10 minutes. Just going to call up my screen right now. So Jason, I don't believe we've met, but when we're hearing about the English and drama experience, I mean, obviously that's an area that's very near and dear to me. Yes, one of my areas is Indigenous literatures, theater, and film. Just important to know my background is coming from a non-native background. My background is Filipino on my mom's side and French Canadian, hence my last name on my father's side. It's a long journey to show how I've arrived at where I am now. So if you're interested, you can explore some of my work on this website, mru.ca/Blackfoot Odyssey. But these are 3 items that I saw on today's panel I thought speak to what I'm going to show. So prior to joining MRU in 2022 as assistant professor. I'm just coming to the end of my third year. I worked at the University of Lethbridge. I still consider Lethbridge my home. It's very close to me. I was there for a long time. And I was working I was the perennial sessional contract instructor, and I was at U of L for about 10 years, moved there in 2011. And as we likely know, is U of L, with their faculty association, we went on job action. We took job action in 2022. So I was putting together my MRU application during the job action. It was so intense during the day, but coming home and working on an application was really calming to some extent. It gave me hope. So here are some images. This is collective action. We really grew close, and it's too bad that I left for MRU, because I felt that was the closest I became with so many colleagues from across the university. So that's us in front of the City Hall, and then we had our headquarters, our HQ. It used to be, I think, a hearing aid center. It was, I think, on 3rd Avenue. We turned it into our headquarters, so this is where we're all moving. We've all moved in. So it was a long, and this is, I was part of a couple committees, the Job Action Materials Committee, as well as the Social Committee. And so this is us in the headquarters preparing the food. And this is a visual that we created after job action. It was 40 days, 40 long days. So February 10th, and then it ended into March. And we showed this image to our students when we returned to just show that this clearly was a case of union busting. I mean, out of those 40 days, it was really about 4 days of actual negotiation. It was just terrible. And from what I was representing as the contract instructor, I didn't feel, and I certainly am not alone. I mean, we couldn't get everything we needed, but certainly contract instructors and sessional instructors, we did feel, despite everything that happened, we felt like our concerns weren't heard. I know one of the MOU did come out of that time where they would seriously look into the situation that we were bringing to our attention concerning sessional and contract instructors. And I believe they are in the process of working on a what is called a teaching professoriate. I believe, I'm not sure how that's happening. We have that at MRU. So it was great to just being part of one institution that was fighting for something, and then I could just jump 2 hours north and it's here, and it's fully functioning, alive and well. So so to get that strike vote, one of the I guess what her role was communications subcommittee chair. She asked members of the community to put together a video that would complement, I'm reading her words here, that would complement or as an alternative to the town halls. It would feature faces and voices that people haven't heard from as much to date, and to convey the information in a way that is shorter and more accessible, not at a scheduled time than the town halls. Ideally, it will be informational. Why should people vote yes? And help members who may be on the fence to realize the breadth of support that exists across departments, career stages, demographics, and so forth. It will only be effective if we receive a number of videos, so please consider making one. So I did make one. It is about 5 minutes, but I'm not going to show the whole thing because of time, obviously. But I'm just going to share the first minute and a half, and you'll hear my contribution. And I really stuck to the 20-second limit that they gave us. Okay, so we're just going to watch the first minute and a half.
I'm voting yes because I believe in collegial governance, I care about student learning conditions, and I'm worried about the future of our university.
I'm voting yes in support of our junior and most precarious colleagues. We need a better deal, especially for those most exploited and exploitable.
I'm going to vote yes if there's a strike vote to support our representatives who are negotiating on our behalf with the board based on a mandate that we have given them in a survey from April 2020, and thereby give them one of the most significant tools in moving forward in the negotiations. I do hope that the current impasse will end soon, and that we, the faculty, can continue to focus on what we do and what we love, which is working with the students in teaching and research. Our students and the university are worth fighting for.
This semester at the university, I'm teaching 3 courses, supervising an independent study, and sitting on a PhD committee for someone who's hoping to graduate this year. I have no benefits, no professional supplements, and no job security, and sadly, I'm not alone. there are many people like me in these precarious positions working at the university. I'm voting yes on the strike vote so that this treatment will stop. It's gone on for too long and it's become normalized and accepted, and it's not right. Okay. Okay, Brian, how are we doing for time? I've got a few more minutes left.
You've got a minute and a half.
Okay, so they created a series of videos for the strike, for the actual job action. Obviously, again, I don't have time to share the whole thing, but if you're interested, it is a worthwhile video checking. I'll just maybe share the first 15, 20 seconds. So every Friday on the picket line, we had to.
When I started drinking warm water
hold on,
to
of
help
course,
me lose
the
weight, my
advertisements.
friends laughed at me. But when they saw how
Trying to figure out where he is. Christopher Grignard, if you'd like, oh, here he is. Christy, if you'd like to come forward and say a few words, we'd really appreciate that.
Hello, Oki. Thank you for asking me to speak. I work at the University of Lethbridge. This semester is my 10th term contract. I'm here to represent all those who are precariously employed, and I know there are several here, and I know this is something that's a fight right across. I want to, we've been hearing this word disrespect being thrown around, and a lot of people are realizing it, unfortunately, for the first time. They're startled by this, particularly our students that are now seeing what's happening behind the scenes. And for those who are precariously employed, we're no stranger to disrespect. Okay, I'll end there. So thank you again. And I just want to acknowledge the member engagement and services officer at MRU. She's with us right now, Lisa Choi. Going back to what members have said on the panel, that tap on the shoulder, we all have our roles and our strengths and talents, and it really helps to be encouraged and to step up, and again to go back to being asked on this panel. So thank you for your time, and thanks again, Lisa, for recognizing what I can offer.
Thanks so much, Christopher. And to keep us moving, given our tight schedule, we're going to move right on to Dr. Kirk Niergarth. He is a labor historian right here at Mount Royal in our Department of Humanities. He's got his PhD from the University of New Brunswick, and he has served on the MRFA's executive board. And in fact, he was our negotiating officer for the previous bargaining round. And now we'd like to hear from Kirk and his insights about collective action.
Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks to the other panelists. I'm going to say many of the same things in a slightly less exciting way. And I just, Brian asked me to provide some historical context, and I'm a historian, that's what I do. But I have to admit that historians can be kind of annoying. We say things like, well, this has happened before. We've been here before. But when it comes to questions like, okay, well, then what should we do? That's when we tend to run mumbling back to the archives. And I'm no different. I will eventually say that we've been here before, but as I try to cover in 10 minutes, unions history of, I will at least offer some thoughts, not so much on what we ought to do at this particular moment in our province and in our world, but how we ought to do it. Historical memory is pretty important. If I was to wake up tomorrow with no memory, I'd have a lot of questions. Who are these small people demanding I drive them everywhere? Why do I live in such a bloody cold place? I might be tempted to, pack up my pantry and head south, ditch these annoying little freeloaders. This version of myself, person divorced from culture, from history, from relationships to people and place, is of course a fiction. But this fiction, the self-interested individual acting in benevolent self-interest, is one that plays a considerable part in current economic thinking. And the stories produced by that thinking are pretty widespread in our society, and they often come up when we talk about unions. Take, for example, our union, the MRFA. None of us were free to choose whether to become members and pay dues. Does it serve your self-interest? Do you get valued for that money? Maybe, maybe not. Thinking about freedom and value in that way is one thing I want to question when we look at the history of unions. And I want to say that there's maybe another way of thinking about both of those words. Let's start with freedom. Yes, our union membership is not a free choice. It's an inheritance. It's passed down to us from Canadian workers who 100 years before the MRFA was founded in 1969 also did not have the free choice to join a union because unions were illegal. Workers formed them anyway. Eventually, so many did that as of 1872, unions were sort of legal, sort of because strikes were still illegal. You couldn't picket, you could be fired with impunity, but workers struck anyway. And many suffered significant privation. But over time, the cost of strikes and their threat to the economic hierarchy led employers and the state and unions to make some key concessions. If workers voted for collective bargaining, an employer would need to recognize their union. If a workplace was unionized, new workers would automatically be part of that union, and unions, in their part, would be forced to follow a protracted legal process before they could go on strike, and those strikes would be significantly constrained. We've inherited these and other collective bargaining rights as a result of past struggles and past compromise. And some of this inheritance does limit individual freedom, just as inherited traffic rules prevent freely driving the wrong way on a one-way street. But how free are workers when they live with the fear of arbitrary dismissal? Do you really have freedom of speech in those circumstances? Meaningful academic freedom in our context was essentially non-existent before the rise of faculty unions in the second half of the 20th century. I'm glad that there's a representative of the ATA here. Thanks to the ATA, as of 1937, women teachers in Alberta were free to get married and continue their teaching career. If you can't be fired because your boss doesn't like your politics, your religion, your looks, or if you complain about unsafe working conditions, it is because of collective agreements, labor laws, and social norms won through decades of union activism. And that activism underpins some of the most basic freedoms of a democratic society. And of value. There's economic value in unionization, to be sure, but what I really want to use the rest of my 10 minutes today about is to talk about the value of values. And this is, I think, something that Curtis was showing us. Unions emerged within the capitalist system, but they are in many ways its moral inverse. The earliest form of unions were mutual benefit societies, which were established so that workers could help provide for each other's families in times of misfortune. This impulse was at the heart of Calgary's first union, a local assembly of the Knights of Labor established here in 1886. Their slogan was, "An injury to one is the concern of all." Now, they were way ahead of their time. They welcomed skilled and unskilled men, women, black and white. Not many unions of that time were similarly open, but most of them then and since have included at least an inkling of the basic impulses of mutuality, reciprocity, and recognition of common human dignity. These are very old ideas, reflecting, for example, Indigenous societies' notion of the bowl with one spoon, or underpinning the morality of many world religions. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Time is another value that unions have understood differently than employers. In the 1870s, there was the 9-hour movement. A couple of decades later, it was for an 8-hour day, and then a 5-day week. Weekends and vacations, if you are lucky enough to have them, are the fruits again of a century and a half of struggle. Time not working was seen by these workers as invaluable and worth fighting for. As one unionist told his employer in 1872, "We do not want to be richer serfs, but better men." Better people, we would say today. Yes, it was important to make a good living, but this was only part of making a good life. But a good life for whom? There's another side to the history of unions that's less inspiring. Insofar as in various times and places they have served to protect the interests of some workers and exclude others from their sphere of concern. These exclusions stem from fear, and these fears had foundation. In the late 19th century, employers were driving wages down by employing women and recent immigrants. 100 years later, corporations were relocating to low-wage jurisdictions to undermine union gains. And this has pushed some unions and unionists then and now to support nativism and protectionism. And it might, for a while, preserve the vestiges of relative privilege. But really, in the history of unions, when they've been most successful in this country and elsewhere, in the decades after the Second World War, for example, they adopted a very different mentality. Chastened by the experience of depression and fascism, they broadened their spheres of concern and began to devote energy and resources to anti-discrimination campaigns and lobbying for human rights legislation. They came to recognize that using difference to promote division served the best interests of employers. The alternative, in a society then as now with many varied forms of subordination, was an always fragile and imperfectly demonstrated union value, solidarity. And solidarity is the value that flies most in the face of capitalist common sense. What interest do I share with an elementary school janitor who today is walking a picket line in Calgary? I mean, is it really so hard to see that I count on her to provide education for my future students, my future doctors and plumbers and scientists and janitors too? But do I value my debts to her, my dependence upon her enough that I will pay taxes such that she might have her first raise in a decade on $34,000 a year? The answer should be so obvious. And yet, as wealth has been increasingly concentrated in our society, we have begun to forget what commonwealth once meant and the value of and in solidarity. So here it comes. I am going to say it. We've been here before. In the 1920s, in response to the mass uprisings surrounding the end of the First World War, there was considerable backlash against unions and union values. Over the course of that decade, not just the relative, but the absolute number of union members in Canada fell precipitously. Wages did not keep pace with inflation, yet tremendous private fortunes were made through stock speculation and unsustainable credit markets. Income inequality rose, and business-like political leaders in both Canada and the United States sought to boost national economies through aggressive tariff policies abroad and government parsimony at home. In places like Germany, a growing minority were attracted to a far-right party, and internationally, authoritarianism and extraterritorial aggression was on the rise. Against that rise, the institutions of international law and cooperation proved toothless. Does all this sound in any way depressingly familiar? We all know how it all worked out in the 30s and in the Second World War. I do not want my children to be forced to win again a war won at great cost by my grandparents. Our union inheritance is one that we can choose to embrace as we contemplate our resistance to the very real threats that seem everywhere ascendant. We might answer greed with selflessness, division with mutuality, lawless aggression with a commitment to democratic equality. An injury to one is the concern of all is still a relevant call to action as we contemplate our collective power to build the kind of institutions and society that serve and sustain our common human interests. Thanks for your attention and solidarity.